Everything seemed perfect at first. I just married the woman I thought was my forever, and man, was I riding high. We'd tied the knot in a small ceremony, nothing fancy, just family and a few close friends, but it felt like the world was ours. To celebrate, we planned a big trip with some buddies to this beach town in Mexico. A last hurrah before settling into married life. It was supposed to be perfect. Sun, sand, and a week of laughing with my new wife, Sarah, and our crew. But that night something broke, and it wasn't just my heart. We'd rented this spot near the beach, a place buzzing with music and cheap tequila. The plan was to party hard, dance under the stars, and make memories. Our friends were there, Tommy and his girlfriend Jen, plus a couple others from back home. The air was thick with humidity, the kind that sticks to your skin, and the bar was alive with locals and tourists mixing it up. Sarah was in her element, laughing loud, tossing her hair back, downing shots like she was 21 again. I loved watching her like that, all free and alive, but I wasn't feeling it. Maybe it was the heat, maybe the tacos from lunch didn't sit right, but my stomach was churning, and my head felt heavy. I tried to keep up, sipping a beer, but by midnight I was done. "Hey babe," I said, leaning close so she could hear me over the thumping music. "I'm gonna head back to the hotel. Not feeling great." She turned, her eyes glassy from the drinks, and gave me that pouty look she always used when she wanted me to stay. "Already? Come on, it's our honeymoon. One more dance?" I forced a smile. "Nah, you have fun. I'll see you in a bit." I trusted her, you know. We'd been together 3 years, through job losses, late night talks, and all the little fights that make a couple real. I figured she'd dance a bit, maybe have another drink, and crash with me later. So I kissed her forehead, waved to Tommy, and trudged back to our room, the sound of the party fading behind me. The hotel was a short walk, maybe 10 minutes, and I collapsed onto the bed, the fan overhead doing a lazy spin. I didn't think much of it then, just figured I'd sleep it off, and we'd laugh about my weak stomach in the morning. Sarah didn't come back that night. I woke up to sunlight burning through the curtains, my mouth dry as sand. She was there, curled up on her side of the bed, smelling faintly of booze and perfume. I didn't ask questions. She mumbled something about staying out late with Jen, and I let it slide. We were on vacation, right? No need to make a fuss. A month later, back home in Ohio, life was settling in. We'd moved into a little house, nothing big, but ours. I was working construction, long days swinging a hammer, and Sarah was picking up shifts at a diner. Things felt good, normal. Then one night I met Tommy for beers at our usual spot, a dive bar with sticky floors and a jukebox that only played Springsteen. We were shooting the breeze, talking about the trip, when Tommy got quiet, staring into his bottle like it held some big secret. "Man, I gotta tell you something," he said, his voice low. "That night you left the party early, Sarah, she wasn't just dancing." My gut twisted, like it knew what was coming before my brain caught up. "What are you talking about?" He wouldn't look at me. "She was hammered, man. I saw her with some guy out back by the bar. They were close, real close." I didn't want to say anything, but Jen saw it too. "Thought you should know." The bar noise faded out, like someone turned down the volume on the world. My hands gripped the bottle so tight I thought it'd shatter. "You sure?" I asked, my voice sounding like it belonged to someone else. Tommy nodded, still not meeting my eyes. "Yeah, I'm sorry, man." I didn't yell or flip the table. I just sat there, the weight of it sinking in. Sarah, my wife, the woman I'd sworn to build a life with, had betrayed me. Not just a drunken mistake, but something that felt like a knife to the chest. I paid the tab, drove home in silence, and stared at the ceiling all night. Her sleeping next to me like nothing was wrong. That's when I knew. Everything had changed. I wasn't the same guy anymore, and this wasn't the life I thought we had. What she didn't know was I had money, real money, tucked away in a trust from my granddad, who was still kicking, sharp as ever. Stocks, securities, all hidden in a legal shell she'd never sniff out. I wasn't about to let her near it, so I kept my mouth shut and went straight to a lawyer. I was at work the next day, hammering nails on a construction site, the sun hot on my neck. but my mind was miles away. Every swing of the hammer felt like I was driving down the anger, the betrayal, the questions. Why'd she do it? Was it just one night, or was there more? I couldn't confront her yet, not without a plan. Granddad had taught me to think 3 steps ahead, to keep my cards close. He was the one who'd set up the trust years ago, a fortune he'd built from smart investments, and he'd made sure I knew how to protect it. "Don't flash it, son," he'd told me over coffee at his place last month. "Folks'll come for what's yours if you ain't careful." I'd listened, and now that advice was my lifeline. The trust was my secret weapon. Granddad had moved his stocks and securities into a shell company, all legal, locked up tight so nobody could touch it without my say-so. Sarah thought we were just scraping by on my construction checks and her diner tips, saving for a house someday. She had no clue about the millions sitting in that trust, growing quietly, ready for me to claim when the time was right. The more I thought about her betrayal, the clearer it got. She didn't deserve a piece of our life, let alone the fortune she didn't even know existed. I wasn't going to let her play me for a fool any longer. That evening, after Sarah left for her diner shift, I grabbed my keys and headed to see Mike Callahan, a lawyer Granddad had worked with for years. His office was above a hardware store, a no-frills spot that smelled faintly of sawdust. I'd met Mike once when Granddad had me sign papers for the trust, back when I was just out of high school. He was a straight shooter, the kind of guy who didn't waste words. I walked in, my boots still caked with dirt from the site, and sat across from him. "Mike," I said, getting right to it, "my wife cheated on me. I want her out of my life, and I need to make sure she don't get a dime of what's mine." Mike leaned back, his pen tapping the desk, sizing me up like he was reading a blueprint. "You got proof?" he asked. "Not yet," I said. "Just a friend's word, but I'll find it." He nodded, like he'd heard this story before. "Ohio's no fault for divorce, but infidelity can tip the scales. Alimony, assets, that kind of thing. What's this about protecting what's yours?" I told him about the trust, the stocks and securities Granddad had set up, all tucked away in that shell company. Sarah didn't know it existed, and I wanted it to stay that way. Mike's eyes sharpened, not greedy, but like he saw the play unfolding. "Your granddad's a smart man," he said. "That trust's separate property, long as you don't mix it with marital funds. You tap into it yet? Put any in a joint account?" "Nope," I said. "It's just sitting there untouched, like Granddad told me to keep it." "Good," Mike said, jotting notes. "Keep it locked up. If you want a clean break, we need evidence of her cheating. Without it, she could still come after your regular assets, maybe spousal support." He leaned forward, his voice low. "Get me proof, and we'll build a wall around that trust she can't climb." I left his office with a fire in my belly. Sarah thought she could betray me and keep living our life like nothing happened. But she had no idea what I was holding. I wasn't just some construction guy scraping by. I had Granddad's trust, his smarts, and a plan. She'd crossed the wrong man, and I was going to make sure she felt the consequences. The fight was just getting started, and I was ready to play hardball. Sitting in my truck outside Mike's office, the engine rumbling, I felt the anger boiling, but kept it locked down. I wasn't going to let Sarah play me for a fool. I had to go back to where it happened, Mexico, and dig up the truth. I called Frank Russo, the private investigator I'd heard about from a guy on my construction crew. Frank was rough around the edges, a guy who lived on coffee and cigarettes, but he knew how to get answers. I met him at a diner near the highway, laid out everything: the beach party in Puerto Vallarta, Sarah's late night, Tommy's story about her with some guy. "I need evidence," I told him, my voice low. "Something that proves she cheated." Frank scribbled on a napkin, his eyes sharp. "You got a specific place? Date? Anything to narrow it down?" "Beach bar in Puerto Vallarta, about a month ago," I said. "Probably around midnight. Our friends Tommy and Jen were there. I left early, feeling sick." He nodded like this was routine. "Mexico's tricky, but I've got contacts. I can fly down, poke around. You want to come? Might help to have you there." Jog memories. "I'm in," I said. No way was I sitting this out. We booked flights for the next day, a quick trip to Puerto Vallarta. I told Sarah I was heading out for a work thing, some construction job out of town. She didn't bat an eye, just waved me off while scrolling her phone. That made it worse, her acting like everything was fine. We landed in Puerto Vallarta by noon, the heat hitting like a wall as we stepped off the plane. Frank had a buddy, Luis, a local fixer who knew the town's underbelly. We met him at a taco stand near the beach, the air thick with salt and grilled meat. Luis had a lead on the bar, a place called La Cantina, where we'd partied that night. They got cameras, he said, wiping salsa off his chin. Owner's a guy named Javier. Keeps footage for a month, maybe 2 if you got cash. Frank and I drove to La Cantina in Luis's beat-up van, weaving through narrow streets packed with tourists and vendors. The bar was quieter in the daytime, just a few locals sipping beers. Javier, a stocky guy with a mustache, was behind the counter, counting bottles. Frank slid him $100 and explained we needed footage from a specific night. I gave the date, mentioned the party, and showed him a picture of Sarah from my phone. Javier's eyes flicked to it, then back to me. Yeah, I remember that group, he said. Loud, lots of tequila. Let's check the tapes. He took us to a back office, a cramped space with a computer and stacks of receipts. After some clicking, he pulled up the footage. There it was, grainy but clear. Sarah at the bar laughing, a drink in her hand, leaning close to a guy in a cowboy hat. My stomach twisted as I watched them slip out to the alley, her hand on his arm, then kissing him like I wasn't her husband. It wasn't quick. They lingered, her hands pulling him closer. I gripped the edge of the desk, keeping my cool, but inside I was raging. Who's the guy? I asked, my voice tight. Javier paused the video. That's Clayton Reeves, American, works as a ranch hand nearby. Comes in sometimes, usually with the expat crowd. You know where we can find him? Frank asked, already jotting notes. Javier nodded. He's at a ranch about 10 miles out. I can get you an address, but it'll cost extra. Frank slid him another 50, and we had a location. I asked for a copy of the footage, and Javier burned it onto a USB for another $20. Every dollar was worth it. My hands shook as I held that drive, the proof I needed to bury Sarah's lies. Frank and I got back in the van, the address in hand. You sure about this? He asked, lighting a cigarette. Confronting this guy could get messy. I'm sure, I said. I need him to talk. Clayton Reeves was my key, and I wasn't leaving Mexico without his name tied to the truth. Sarah thought she'd gotten away with it, but I was closing in, and the tension was like a rope pulling tighter with every step. We piled into Luis's van, the engine rattling as we bounced down a dusty road, past cacti and grazing cattle. Frank was in the front, going over his notes while I sat in the back, replaying that video in my head. Sarah's hands on Clayton, their lips locked like I was nothing. My fist clenched, but I kept it together. This wasn't about losing control. It was about getting what I needed to bury her lies. We pulled up to the ranch, a sprawling place with a few barns and a cluster of trailers for the workers. Clayton was out front, loading feed bags onto a flatbed truck, his cowboy hat tilted low against the sun. He looked up as we parked, wiping his hands on his jeans, his eyes narrowing at the sight of us. Frank took the lead, stepping out with his PI badge flashing. Clayton Reeves, we need to talk. Clayton squinted, tossing a bag onto the truck. Who's asking? His voice was slow, guarded, like he already knew trouble was coming. I'm Frank Russo, private investigator, Frank said, nodding at me. This is my client. We're here about a night at La Cantina, about a month back. You were with a woman named Sarah. Clayton's face didn't change, but his shoulders tensed. Don't know no Sarah, he said, turning back to the feed bags. You got the wrong guy. I stepped forward, my boots kicking up dust. That's bull, Clayton, I said, keeping my voice steady but hard. I got you on video, kissing my wife at that bar. You gonna tell me that wasn't you? He froze just for a second, then shrugged like it was nothing. Lots of guys wear hats like mine. You're barking up the wrong tree. Frank pulled out his phone, queued up the footage from La Cantina, and shoved it in Clayton's face. This you, pal? Because it looks like you, right there with her in the alley. Clayton glanced at the screen, his jaw twitching, but he stuck to his story. Ain't me. You're wasting my time. He turned away, grabbing another bag, acting like we'd just vanish if he ignored us. That's when my patience snapped. I grabbed a shovel leaning against the trailer and slammed the handle into the ground near his feet, the metal ringing loud enough to make him jump. He stumbled back, tripping over a bag, and his hand hit the dirt. "All right, enough!" he shouted, scrambling up, his hat tumbling off. I stepped closer, my boot landing on his fingers, not hard enough to do real damage, but enough to make him flinch. It was an accident, I swear, but it got his attention fast. "Start talking," I said, my voice low and cold. "What happened with Sarah that night?" Frank hit record on his phone, holding it steady. Clayton looked between us, cornered, his bravado gone. "Okay, fine. It was me," he said, his voice shaky. "That night at La Cantina, she came on to me, man. Said she was celebrating, kept buying me tequila shots. I didn't know she was married, I swear. We talked, we danced, and yeah, we kissed out back. She was drunk, said her husband left early, wasn't feeling good. That's all it was, man. Just a kiss." Frank leaned in, keeping the recorder close. "You sure about that? What else did she say? Give us details." Clayton rubbed his hand, wincing. "She said her name was Sarah, works at a diner back in the States. Blonde, real talkative. Kept saying she just wanted to cut loose. I didn't ask for more, and she didn't offer. That's the truth. I wanted to grab him, shake him, demand if there was anything else. But Frank shot me a look to stay calm. He kept Clayton talking, getting every detail. When they met, what they drank, how long they were in that alley. By the time he was done, we had a full statement, recorded clear as day. Clayton sat there looking like he'd just lost a fight, but I didn't care about his feelings. That recording was gold, the final piece I needed to make Sarah face what she'd done. I was already thinking about how to drop this on her, not just to her face, but where it had hit hardest, right in front of everyone who thought she was perfect. So I planned a family dinner, a big one, to drop the bomb and watch her world crack open. I called my parents first, telling them I wanted to host a get-together to celebrate our new marriage. Mom was over the moon, already talking about bringing her famous potato salad. Then I reached out to Sarah's folks in Dayton, playing the happy husband, saying we wanted to bring both families together to mark the occasion. They were all in, no questions asked. Sarah didn't blink when I mentioned the dinner. "Sounds fun," she said, stirring her coffee one morning. "You handling everything?" I nodded, keeping my face neutral. But inside I was coiled tight, ready to spring. I picked a steakhouse just outside our Ohio town, a place we'd gone for birthdays and anniversaries. I reserved a private room to keep the fallout contained, booking space for 12. My parents, Sarah's, my sister and her husband, Sarah's brother, and a few cousins who'd been at our wedding. The week before, I met with Frank, the PI, to finalize the evidence. He'd cleaned up Clayton's recording, every word crisp and damning, and the bar footage was burned onto a USB. I printed stills from the video, Sarah and Clayton in that alley, her hands on him, their lips locked, and tucked them into a manila envelope with a handwritten note. "You thought you could hide this." That envelope was my weapon, and I was itching to use it. Saturday night rolled around, and I drove Sarah to the steakhouse, her chatting about a rude customer at the diner, oblivious to the storm coming. I kept my answers short, my hands gripping the wheel. When we arrived, everyone was already there. My dad telling jokes to my sister, Sarah's mom hugging her cousins, her dad sipping a beer and talking football. The private room buzzed with chatter, the smell of grilled steak and garlic bread filling the air. Sarah played her part perfectly, laughing, hugging everyone, acting like the wife of the year. I let her have her moment, biding my time. We sat down, ordered, ribeyes, chicken, a few salads, and the table was alive with stories about our wedding, the Mexico trip, plans for Thanksgiving. I barely touched my food, my pulse hammering, waiting for the right moment. After the plates were cleared and everyone was sipping drinks, I stood up, glass in hand. "I got a toast," I said, loud enough to hush the room. All eyes turned to me, smiles wide, expecting something sweet. "To Sarah," I said, looking straight at her. She grinned, tilting her head like she was waiting for a love poem. "She's the best, you know. Beautiful, funny, the kind of wife any guy would be lucky to have. She deserves better than me." The table let out a few ahs, and Sarah reached for my arm, her smile all warm and fake. I stepped back, just out of reach. Then I pulled the envelope from my jacket. "Actually, babe, I got you something special," I said, handing it to her. A little surprise. Her eyes lit up, probably thinking it was tickets to Paris or some romantic gesture. She tore it open, and I watched her face as she pulled out the photos and my note. Her smile vanished, her skin going pale as a ghost. The table went silent, forks frozen midair. Sarah's dad leaned over, snatching a photo. "What the hell is this?" he barked, his voice booming. Her mom gasped, seeing Sarah kissing Clayton in that alley. My sister whispered to her husband, and my dad looked at me, confused. Sarah's brother grabbed the note, reading it loud enough for everyone. "You thought you could hide this." Sarah's hands shook, her voice cracking. "This isn't what it looks like. He's lying. He was cheating first." She jabbed a finger at me, her eyes wild, trying to turn the tables. "With who, Sarah?" I said, calm but cutting. "Name one person." "Go on." She stammered, her words falling apart. I heard things, okay? People saw you." It was a weak lie, and the room knew it. Her dad started yelling at her. My mom was asking what was going on, and Sarah's mom was tearing up, muttering about how this couldn't be true. The table erupted. Shouts, questions, accusations flying. Sarah stood, grabbed her purse, and stormed out, her parents chasing after her, yelling apologies over their shoulders. My family stayed, stunned, as I sat down, the envelope still on the table. I'd lit the fuse, and the explosion was just the start. Sunday morning, my phone lit up with Sarah's name. I let it go to voicemail, but she called again, then again, until I finally picked up. Her voice was pure venom, screaming through the line. "What the hell did you do? You humiliated me in front of everyone. You think you can just ruin me like that?" I stayed calm, letting her rage burn itself out. "You ruined yourself, Sarah," I said. "I just showed the truth." That set her off again, cursing, demanding to know why I'd done it. I hung up, done listening to her lies. Before the dinner, I'd already taken steps to protect myself. Friday night after work, I'd gone to the bank and cleared out our joint account. Every cent of the $8,000 we'd saved for bills and that dream house down payment. It wasn't much compared to the trust Granddad left me, but I wasn't leaving anything for her to grab. I moved it to a new account in my name only, the teller giving me a curious look but processing it without a fuss. Sarah didn't know about the trust, and I was damn sure she wouldn't get a piece of our shared cash either. By noon, I heard tires crunching on the gravel outside our rented house. Sarah's car pulled up, and she jumped out, her brother Matt right behind her. They marched to the porch, Sarah banging on the door like she was trying to break it down. "Open the damn door," she yelled. I opened it, leaning against the frame, keeping my cool. Her eyes were wild, her hands balled into fists. "You cleared out our account? You think you can just take everything and leave me with nothing?" "You cheated, Sarah," I said, my voice flat. "You don't get to play victim. Get lost." Matt stepped forward, his chest puffed out, trying to look tough. "You're a real piece of work, you know that? Accusing her when you're the one hiding money." I didn't flinch. Matt was all talk, always had been, a gym rat who thought size meant strength. Sarah kept going, shouting about how I'd embarrassed her, how I'd pay for it. She wasn't listening, just spewing venom, her voice cracking with every word. I'd had enough. I stepped inside, grabbed a baseball bat from the hall closet, not to use it, just to make a point. I walked back out, holding it loose by my side, and looked her dead in the eyes. I said, "Get lost, both of you." Sarah froze, her mouth half open, and Matt took a step back, hands up like I was about to swing. I wasn't, but the bat did its job. They muttered curses, climbed into her car, and peeled out, gravel flying. I stood there watching their taillights disappear, my heart pounding, but my resolve hard as steel. A month later, the game changed again. I got a call from my dad. Granddad had passed. It hit hard. He was the man who taught me how to work, how to think, how to keep my cards close. I drove to his lawyer's office in Columbus for the will reading, a small room packed with family I hadn't seen in years. The lawyer, a gray-haired guy named Harold, read it out. Everything, stocks, securities, the whole trust, was mine. Millions, tucked away in that shell company Granddad set up, safe from prying eyes. Sarah still didn't know about it, and I was going to keep it that way. I pulled Harold aside after, my voice low. I'm getting divorced. She doesn't know about the trust, and I don't want her touching a cent. Can you hold it until it's final? Harold nodded, his pen scratching notes. Smart move, he said. As long as you don't accept it or mix it with marital funds, it's separate property. I'll keep it locked until you say go. I shook his hand, relief washing over me. Sarah could scream all she wanted, but she wasn't getting near Granddad's legacy. I drove home, the weight of the confrontation with Sarah and the will reading sitting heavy. She thought she could bully me, guilt me, or spin her way out, but I was one step ahead. The bat hadn't been about violence. It was about showing her I wasn't backing down. Now with the inheritance secured and her betrayal exposed, I was ready for the next fight, and I wasn't going to let her win. A few weeks after Granddad's will reading, she came crawling back, trying to rewrite the story. I was ready to shut her down, take this to court, and make sure she walked away with nothing. My focus was on protecting what was mine and building something new from the ashes of her betrayal. It started with a phone call about a week after Granddad passed. I was at the construction site covered in dust when Sarah's number flashed on my phone. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got me. Her voice was different this time, not angry but soft, almost broken. Can we talk? She said. Please, just hear me out. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet her at a coffee shop near the diner where she worked. I wasn't going soft, I just wanted to see what game she was playing now. She was already there when I walked in, sitting at a table with a mug, her hands fidgeting. She started with tears, saying she was sorry, that the night in Mexico was a mistake, all because of too much tequila. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said, her voice cracking. We can fix this. I love you. Then came the kicker. She mentioned the inheritance. I heard about your granddad's money, she said, eyes darting to mine. We could use it. Start over. Build something together. That's when I knew. Someone had talked, maybe a cousin at the will reading, and now she was after the trust. I leaned back, my coffee untouched. No, Sarah, I said, flat and final. You cheated, you lied, and you're only here because you sniffed out money. We're done. Her tears turned to pleading, then anger. But I walked out, my resolve like iron. She wasn't getting a second chance, and she sure as hell wasn't touching Granddad's legacy. The divorce papers were already in motion, thanks to Mike Callahan, my lawyer. He'd been prepping since I showed him the footage in Clayton's confession. Sarah didn't take it quietly. She hired a lawyer, some slick guy from Dayton, who thought he could spin her story. By the time we got to court 3 months later, the tension was thick. The courtroom was small, just a judge, a bailiff, and our family sitting stiffly on opposite sides. Sarah's lawyer came out swinging, claiming she was entitled to half our assets, including the inheritance. My client was a devoted wife, he said, and this trust was marital property acquired during their marriage. Mike was ready. He stood up calm as ever and laid out the facts. The inheritance was designated solely to my client, held in a trust established before the marriage, he said, sliding documents to the judge. He hasn't accepted it yet, so it's not marital property. Furthermore, we have evidence of infidelity. He played Clayton's recorded confession and showed the bar footage, the grainy images of Sarah and Clayton in that alley projected for everyone to see. Sarah's parents looked away. My mom gripped my hand. Sarah tried to interrupt, claiming I'd pushed her to it, but the judge shut her down, his gavel cracking like a warning. I took the stand, kept it simple. She betrayed me, I said. I trusted her, and she broke that. I don't want her near my family's money. The judge asked if I'd mingled the trust with our joint funds. No, sir, I said. It's still locked up, untouched. That was the clincher. Ohio law was clear. Inheritances are separate unless you mix them. Sarah's lawyer floundered, throwing out weak arguments about her contributions to our marriage, but it was over. The judge ruled in my favor. Divorce finalized. Sarah got nothing, Not a cent from our joint account, which I'd already cleared, and not a dime from the trust. I walked out of that courtroom feeling lighter than I had in months. With the divorce behind me, I called Harold, the lawyer handling Granddad's estate, and gave the green light to release the trust. It was millions, stocks, securities, cash, all mine. I didn't just sit on it. I'd always wanted to grow my construction business, so I invested smart, bought new equipment, hired a bigger crew, and bid on bigger contracts. By the end of the year, my company was landing jobs on commercial buildings, not just houses. I was working long hours, but it felt good, like I was building something real, something Sarah could never touch. A year after the divorce, I was thriving, my life bigger than she'd ever imagined, and she was just a bad memory fading fast. I thought that was the end of it, that she'd slink off after the courtroom loss. But Sarah wasn't done. It began about 2 months after the divorce, when I was getting my construction company off the ground. I just landed a contract for a strip mall, my crew buzzing with new hires. One evening, as I was locking up the site, a car pulled up to my house. Sarah's parents. They got out looking nervous, and her mom, Linda, started talking before I could shut the gate. "She's in a bad place," Linda said, her voice shaky. "She's talking about hurting herself, says she needs to see you, just one last dinner to talk things out." Her dad stood there, arms crossed, like he didn't want to be there, but had no choice. I didn't buy it. Sarah had cried wolf before, and this felt like another play. "She's not my problem anymore," I said, keeping the gate between us. "Tell her to move on, and you can leave." Linda started pleading, but her dad just grabbed her arm, muttering something, and they drove off. I figured that was the end of it, but I should have known better. A week later, the weird stuff started. I got a text from an unknown number at midnight. "You'll pay for what you did." No name, just that. I ignored it, thinking it was a prank. Then 2 days later, I found my truck's tires slashed, all four, right in my driveway. I called the cops, but they said there was no evidence, just some kids probably. A few nights after that, a note was taped to my mailbox, handwritten block letters, "You can't hide forever." My gut told me it was Sarah, but I needed proof. She wasn't the type to get her hands dirty, so I called Frank Russo, my PI, and told him to dig. Frank got to work, tailing Sarah again, this time in Ohio. She was still working at the diner, living in a cheap apartment, but he noticed her meeting a guy at a bar across town, someone who looked rough, tattoos, beat-up jacket, always glancing around. Frank followed him, ran his plates, and found out his name. Eddie Malone, a lowlife with a rap sheet for petty theft and bar fights. Frank hacked into Sarah's phone records. Don't ask me how, and found texts between her and Eddie. She was stringing him along, promising him cash, maybe more, to mess with me. "Make him scared," one text read. "He took everything from me." Frank kept digging and hit gold. Sarah had dirt on Eddie, some old arrest she'd threatened to tip off to his parole officer unless he did what she wanted. She was blackmailing him, turning him into her errand boy. He'd slashed my tires, sent the texts, left the notes, all on her orders. Frank even caught him on a gas station camera near my house the night the tires went flat, his face clear under the lights. But it got worse. Sarah had pushed Eddie to escalate, telling him to follow me, watch my routines, even hinting at breaking into my office to plant something incriminating. Frank got it all, texts, voicemails, even a recorded call where she laughed about teaching me a lesson. I was livid, but not surprised. This wasn't about regret or love. It was revenge, pure and simple. I met Frank at a diner to go over the evidence, his laptop open with screenshots and recordings. "She's not sorry," he said, sipping coffee. "She's obsessed. You need to take this to the cops. Maybe get a restraining order." I nodded, my jaw tight. The texts, the tires, the notes. They weren't just pranks. Sarah was trying to tear me down, and she'd roped in some desperate guy to do it. I took Frank's evidence to the police the next day, filed a report, and showed them everything. They opened a case, started looking for Eddie, but Sarah was slippery. She'd kept her hands clean, using burner phones and Eddie as her shield. Still, I had enough to scare her off for now. The cops took it seriously. extortion, harassment, conspiracy to commit fraud. They picked Sarah up that afternoon at her apartment. She tried to talk her way out, claiming Eddie was lying, but the evidence was ironclad. Eddie, facing his own charges, flipped on her for a lighter sentence, giving the police a full statement about her blackmail and schemes. Last I heard, Sarah was facing serious charges, extortion, harassment, maybe more. The prosecutor was building a case, and Eddie's testimony was the nail in her coffin. I didn't stop there. I installed cameras at my house and office, hired a security guy for the construction yard, and double-checked every contract to make sure my business was untouchable. Sarah had tried to tear me down, but I was stronger than ever. I moved on, focused on my crew, my projects, my life, free of her poison and ready for whatever came next. Drop your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of the main character's decision to expose Sarah's betrayal at the family dinner? Was it a bold move or too harsh? And if you enjoyed the ride, don't forget to like and subscribe for more.